Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We're here to continue our expectation series on the Ravens. As we look at an offensive player and a defensive player, we'll continue until we're done. Last couple of shows still to be done today. Sam Mustipher, the backup center, and David Ojabo, the pass rusher we're all looking forward to seeing in his first real NFL season. Here to join me to talk about that is Danny Joseph. Danny, how you doing?
Good, Ken. Excited to talk about these two young. David Ojabo is young. Two newcomers to this Ravens season. We didn't get to see a whole lot of Ojabo and Mustipher his first season as a Raven. So hopefully, two players that can help either build depth or really contribute this season.
All right, outstanding. So Sam Mustipher, let's start with him. He's 27 now. That's as of 8/13. He's not quite 27, but he'll be there right after the first exhibition game. In his fourth season now, so he'll be an unrestricted free agent after 2023, like a large portion of the Ravens roster. A guy who probably will not be around after this season, or at least they'll have to negotiate a new contract after that. 6'2", 332 pounds now. Now, Maureen and I watched him play a fair amount at Notre Dame because that's where she went to school. And he was a lot smaller when he was playing that. Always been a kind of a short-armed guy at 32 1/8 inches, but he was small and he was quite slow. 5:59.40 at his Notre Dame pro day. You know how they always exaggerate pro day numbers. I don't think that's the direction they exaggerate in. And a 5:59.40 is titanically slow. And he weighs a lot more than he did at that point. He probably has picked up another 25 pounds since then.
Yeah, 5:59 is for a center. That's nearing Orlando Brown territory of slow 40-yard dashes. And yeah, I started for the Bears for the last 3 years, which we can get into more about his type of play, but certainly a center that we're not hoping we see a whole lot of on the field. But as a depth piece, and the Ravens were clearly looking to add some type of interior O-line depth. After losing Powers and maybe some uncertainty on the roster, seemed like a fair pickup given the salary cap constraints and maybe some roster needs.
Yeah, definitely. He meets the salary cap need because he's a vet min guy, but a guy who is adequate run blocker, probably in the NFL. When I looked at him, he definitely seems to have some issues with mobility that will have to be addressed. But he's the kind of player that the Ravens have such a good record of rehabilitating and drafting offensive linemen that I'm modestly hopeful for, that he can be good. He certainly has the size right now in terms of anchoring as a center, as a pass blocker. He has length issues still, but he does have the size to be a decent backup center. Now, they may be asking him to do more than that. So it wouldn't be surprising to me if he's a guy that ends up showing up on the field as a sixth offensive lineman, that he's part of a backup guard situation. I just think he's fairly far down the totem pole at guard, as I would see it now, to see him seeing a lot of time there.
Absolutely. It's not in their best interest, given their salary cap situation over the next couple of years, to want him to become a serious guard option or even the backup guard. Just with for how tight things are going to be over the next 3 years, having him on a 1-year deal, it's in their best interest to develop their younger guys that they're going to be able to contractually have for the next 2-3 years, like a Salah or even a Falele, who has 3 more years left on his rookie deal. Mustipher, it's not in their interest as a guard option, but if they like his versatility enough, which the Ravens love when their offensive linemen, particularly their interior offensive linemen, have great versatility, he can become somebody to, I think, contribute in a pretty positive way. And maybe somebody they look to keep around, either on a continuous rolling 1-year vet minimum, or maybe they can find carve out a spot for him some way somehow in the future.
Yeah, if if you look at him, he does not do much more than Linderbaum in any area. Now, no, we wouldn't expect him to be Tyler Linderbaum, but he's one of the worst pass blockers in the league. Linderbaum, if you look at PFF, was 27th of 31 centers with 600 plus snaps, and Linderbaum was 29th. Sorry, Mustipher was 27th, and Lindy was 29th. So, neither of those guys is a particularly good pass blocker. They're both fairly similar. PFF also rolls in the snaps into that, so I don't have a breakdown of Mustipher snaps, but I'd be a little bit concerned to go back and see, did he have some wild snaps with the Bears that are reducing that number, or is it really all just pass blocking? They both have some similar length issues in terms of being short-armed for the position. But like I say, Mustipher's a much bigger man in terms of the amount of weight he's playing with. He just doesn't really play quickly no matter what he does, whereas that's what Linderbaum's A trait is the ability to move quickly and hopefully complement some bigger men that will be playing at both guard spot.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some, videos on, watching some, YouTube, some film clips to get ready for this. There's a couple of videos of Mustipher's, some of his pass blocking snaps, fairly failing to communicate switches and allowing like free run interior pressure on Justin Fields. There's a couple that are titled like, what is Mustipher doing? I can definitely see how his pass blocking rating is ranked pretty low, and it just seems like maybe a little bit of an athletic mismatch when it comes to him on the interior. We're going to definitely be paying attention to see how Linderbaum can overcome some of his athletic disadvantages. Mustipher seem a little bit different. He doesn't necessarily have that speed element that I think Linderbaum can bring on run blocking snaps and stuff in the run game where you can get up and down the field in the second level. Mustipher, much bigger guy, but mobility seems to be a huge issue for him in the pass game, rather than something like Linderbaum where it's arm length and overcoming a size disadvantage like that.
One thing we saw out of the Ravens last year, which was totally unexpected, was Morgan Moses really showing a lot more mobility than anyone would have expected. Now, Morgan Moses was never part of the discussion, as far as I can tell, to move to left tackle during the time Ronnie Stanley was out. But to see him on some of those counters and move on the run and be the trailing man on two-man poles and still, be going and finding a body to block, that's actually a very difficult block to make. Ronnie Stanley was not particularly effective at those this last year. You don't have to on every one. Is the way I would grade it. You don't even downgrade a player for not finding a block, but you certainly think, yeah, that's a great block when the trailing player goes and can participate at all. And when he can go and square up somebody as solidly as Moses did this last year, that's terrific. So what I'm hoping for with Mustipher is that when he's the trailing man on some of these outside pulls, meaning it's a center and a tackle, but they're pulling the outside, and also when it's a center tackle and they're pulling with him being the lead man, that he's going to be better at that they see something in his footwork that they either think they can fix because it really hasn't been there before, or they say, okay, we can work with that. The Bears system didn't really play to his strength, or the Bears continuity sucked, and so that's why he wasn't effective in there, but that's okay. We know how to fix that. So I'm really hoping that's a big part of what the Ravens are looking at with Mustipher.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Ravens historically have been fairly above average when it comes to developing offensive linemen, even drafting too. It really can't be understated how some of their misses have even been fair. But historically, the Ravens drafting offensive linemen, it seems like they have a great stronghold on developing and like figuring out talent at these positions, whether it's tackle or guard or center. Going down the line, you think of some of the guys that have become some of the best offensive linemen in the league, and have even gone on to other teams and become the best offensive lineman in the league. Ryan Jensen, we can go on and on, but if it's one position that you trust that the organization can pick traits and then see what they want to add, to their room, and maybe they can fix a player like this. I think interior offensive line is probably one of the first ones that come to mind.
Yeah, they've definitely had some misses at the position, but the top guys have worked out. Ben Grubbs and Chris Chester are the two guards that they've taken at the top of the draft. If you look at the 4th round and later, they've got some hits and they've got some misses, but Ben Powers is a big hit. Edwin Mulatalo, a big hit. Jermaine Illuminor, a guy who's kind of forgotten in this, but he's still playing in the NFL right now. And then if you go out to tackle, where a lot of their guys were in college, that's where they've been even better. With Marshall Yonda in the 3rd round, Orlando Brown in the 3rd round, and then players like Rick Wagner in round 5, Tony Pashos, who got a big contract with Carolina in round 5, Ryan Jensen in round 6, etc. So been a fairly impressive position for the Ravens to develop some talent. Plenty of undrafted guys too, in terms of players like Cologne and McCary and whatnot that have become something at the NFL level, even though they weren't drafted, but the Ravens took them in as their first team.
Yeah. And yeah, I sorry, I skipped over one of the parts about, you were talking about him snapping. I think that'll be a big deciding factor on what his role exactly is with the Ravens, and particularly how comfortable they are with him, either, if he ever has to play on a game day or he's in as a rotational guy. The snaps have been, I think, something like 2 years ago that we forget how much of a problem and talking point that was. And something I know that you mention a lot is Bozeman's snaps when he was center, and his snaps being relatively slow in comparison to a regular snap, just throwing kind of curveballs or changeups back to Lamar. The urgency I think that this offense is going to play with, and you can tell that Lamar likes to get the ball in his hands and scan the field. And I think that's definitely something that, during camp, I'll be looking to see what kind of updates we get on that, to see if he's a fit in the offense when it comes to just snapping the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's very key. And Linderbaum, that's one of the things he really delivered on during his rookie year. I don't think anybody has any complaints really about how accurate and more importantly, how fast his snaps were. So he's getting a fastball to the gut was what Lamar was getting for a lot of last year. That really helps a quarterback not take his eyes off the field. When you're constantly having to scoop the ball out off of your knees and the pitch might be lower outside or, wherever it might be relative to the strike zone you're expecting, it distracts you and it hurts timing on the play. So having a guy who can do that's important, and you want your backup to be every bit as good as your starter if you can possibly get that. So that may in fact have been a characteristic that they liked with Mustipher. I really just don't have any information on it. That's where I am right now in terms of this. So we'll see. I'll be watching in camp too, and trying to take a look at who seems to have a good handle on that. In terms of competition for an offensive line spot this year, I think this is one of the things I always like to deconstruct fairly deeply in camp. And when you look at my articles on the offense and whatnot, most important thing I can give you is the order of entry, but I also have offensive line notes for every game during the preseason. And I think the Ravens will probably keep 9 on the roster to make 8 on game day. I want to remind people of the rules. In the NFL, you can have 1 additional active player on your game day roster, provided you have 8 offensive linemen. So there is a 100% chance that every NFL team will carry 8 offensive linemen, because otherwise you'd be foolish not to. The only consideration would be if somehow you only wanted to carry 7 on your entire roster, or only had 7 healthy and didn't want to make a change, you might want to carry 7 on a game day. But I've never heard of a team actually going through with that. Every team plays 8, and with the other practice squad elevations and whatnot, you usually aren't even limited by roster frictions that would make you not want to activate somebody who's on your active 53 anyway. But anyway, 9 to make 8 is what you want to think about. Is who are the 9 linemen who are going to make the Ravens? And I think we look at this group. There are the 4 starters at okay, we'll go the 4 starters that they're locks now, not the left guard, meaning are all there, and that's obviously Stanley, Linderbaum, Zeitler, and Moses. So those guys are set. Then you have 4 other guys I think are locks, and that is McCary, Sala, Faalele, and Cleveland. All 4 of those guys have additional years of contract, or they're paying a lot of money for them, or whatever it might be. All of those guys, because of backup tackle needs in McCary's case, are going to be on the roster, and I don't think there's any doubt about that. Any comments on that so far, Danny?
No, I think Cleveland. I think he is maybe the only one that's not a lock given his just pass, but I think it would be dumb to move on. And from what we discussed actually on our on the last pod, it seems like his attitude has turned around. But I do agree. I think that backup left tackle is something that's definitely in this team's plans. I definitely think it's a 9 to make 8 as well. I can't really see a player who they're going to do one of the cut and then the handshake deals. And then Voorhees, they can put him on a season long IR,
NFI.
right? And
NFI actually.
NFI, and they don't need to put him on the roster. Yeah, better.
Just let's still dip our toes in the water on that for just a second. So last year they had David Ojabo, and he started on NFI, and then he was ready to play, and they brought him back, and they got 20 snaps out of him. And it was nice that he didn't lose the year developmentally. But if he stayed on NFI for the entire year, he wouldn't have been paid, and his contract, his years of service would not have told. So he would have, I think that's the correct way to use that term. He would have remained a first year player in this year on his first of 4 years. And that apparently is what the plan is for Voorhees. And so he'll, as I understand it, it's been reported by Zrebeck, is the person I've originally heard this from. The plan is for him to stay there for the entire season. Then the Ravens have 4 years of him starting next year. So that's actually makes that an extremely exciting draft pick in a relative sense.
That is a sharp pick. Yeah, that's stealing a third round player in the 7th round. That's a sharp pick. Yeah, I'm glad I got clarification on that rule, because it sounds too good to be true. And man, if they got that for Ojabo, that would have been great. Yeah. But that's besides the point.
So let's go back. The other guy that I didn't mention yet, and I actually think he's pretty close to a roster lock, is Simpson. So if any was to be cut, I guess it could be one of Faalele, Simpson, or Cleveland, depending on if they just don't see the developmental advances they need out of Faalele. That would be the case with Simpson. I think that the reason I like him to make the roster is because I think he makes the most sense as a backup left tackle out of that group. Now, his feet are not maybe ideal, but he's 6'4", he's 321, and he has very long arms at 34 1/8 inches, which I think has to put him in the discussion at least to play at left tackle if something were to happen to Ronnie Stanley. Of course, we don't even want to think about that possibility because that's a long fall down, and I think McCary is probably the first option in that case. But they're already trying out Ben Cleveland at right tackle. And, I don't even know that Faalele for sure is going to stay as being a backup tackle in the organization, or as that they see as his ultimate position, given the what happened last year, which was not good, or whether they think Cleveland is maybe a better chance for it now. So we'll see kind of how that develops. I think that's going to be one of the interesting things at camp is trying to see how are they rotating through players, obviously on the camp days, but also in the preseason games in terms of how they do that in the order of entry, who plays the second half, who plays the first half, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely, keep Stanley in bubble wrap, and even Morgan Moses is, essential to this team. But it'll be interesting to see which of those guards they try to, experiment a little bit, possibly a tackle, and get their feet wet there. I think Simpson's probably the leader of the clubhouse right now, unless they were to bring somebody in. Looking at free agents, last year their plan was Jawan James, correct? And
that's right. They started him game 1,
and he was injured by game 1 or game 2, and I forget which exact game he went out. But it was a tough stretch to get from Jawan James's injury to the Stanley return week 5.
Yeah,
At
James
Buffalo
played
Bills.
23 snaps in game 1 before he was hurt.
Yeah, I remember the Buffalo Bills and Patriots game. The first half were tough watches at the left tackle turnstile that was the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and obviously some of that was Falele, and he had a couple of very tough games there, starting with the New England game, and in fact he led the team in sacks allowed for the season, despite playing only 100 snaps and change. So not an ideal spot to be if you're Falele, and he was a developmental player forced into a role that was obviously too big for him as a rookie, and I think a couple things about this is, one is, I don't want to give up on the guy completely. I mean, I expect Ravens have such a good record of developing linemen in a way where they make progress year over year that, I think there's still a pretty good chance for him. In terms of what happened this last year, I think you really do got to flush the toilet on it, though, and not pretend like it was something it wasn't, which is something I see from Ravens fans all the time with regard to offensive linemen, that they want to claim somebody as something that they aren't yet. So anyway, lots of development left to go for Falele.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, to get back to Mustipher and his role in the team, where do you see him fitting in terms of his role in the roster? I know we're talking about roster locks, but Mustipher's final spot, where do you see him going?
Yeah, I think he appears to be headed for the practice squad, but that can change in camp, because all it really takes is one injury, and then there's a change to the totem pole that has to occur. But if their depth holds up, I think they would probably want him to be the backup center, assuming that they didn't want to put McCary in the spot, which also is a reasonable choice to make. But if you want to keep McCary as a backup tackle because you don't think you have anybody else, then one good choice to do there, if you trust Mustipher to snap the ball, is to get Mustipher in there, have him playing with some other big men on the inside, and see if that can become a better position for him. He hasn't been a terrible pass blocker. He just hasn't been particularly good. So it's something that it could work out. And hopefully, he's a guy that would be the 10th man. He can be on the practice squad initially. I don't think there's a big chance that he gets taken by another team. He'd be activated for up to 3 games, maybe, due to injuries, if you need him as one of your top 8. And boy, would not be a good situation there if I'm talking about this, that he's one of the 8 guys you need, even though he's not on your roster, meaning you don't trust somebody who's on your roster, or they're hurt. Either one of those is a bad situation. So I think that's the most likely thing. And we probably. He's probably too far down the totem pole at guard, would be my feeling, to ever see action there. But I guess you just kind of never know if he's on the roster for a game to back up at center, that he might not see action at guard.
Yeah, there's just, it seems like there's a lot of competition and depth. I guess is the right term, on who's going to play that left guard spot. Mm-hmm. And we hope that nothing happens to our right, like with Zeitler, with contractually or even injury wise, Linderbaum. We want nothing but pure health for them. Don't really see Mustipher fitting into that type of competition. Unless the Ravens grabbed him in sharply because they see traits in it, but just don't really see that is him being a legitimate part of that competition. And his role as the backup center, I completely agree that I think the practice squad is probably where he's going to end up. And his game day activation may be based either on injury or McCary's role based on a different injury. Yeah. Because it'd be obviously smarter for them to save their practice squad call-ups on Mustipher if McCary is healthy, because he can play an adequate role as a backup center, rather than waste a Mustipher practice squad call up, because you only get so many of those before they have to sign to the active roster.
Yeah, I think it's 3. Yeah.
So you want to make sure you're using those at the right moment. Obviously, we hope Tyler Linderbaum is healthy the whole year, but you do need to have a plan set in place in case that
Yeah,
doesn't happen.
Great point I want to address before we move on to good and great season here. But if Mustipher's status as the backup center could be elevated in importance significantly if McCary has to fill in at tackle, even for a short time, but definitely for an extended time. I think that's how he gets an activation to the 53. If there's a problem like that, and he could definitely be a guy they're trying to protect at that point. One of the things I always say, and this is true on the offensive line, but it's true at every position in the NFL, is the replacement level goes down as an NFL season goes down. It's a moving target because the amount of total talent at the league at every position is less at the end of the year, and you're scrambling for a player who is really on the margin in December, and you're willing to accept a lot less. Well, Sam Mustipher is just the kind of player that might apply to. And if the Ravens have him on the practice squad, as the year grows on, the risk becomes more and more that he'll be picked up by another team who has injury problems on their offensive line and end on him. He's kind of a known quantity. He's started for 3 years, or most of 3 years anyway, in Chicago, and definitely is a guy that other teams think they'll have a handle on who he is, and might be interested in picking up. So while I think he'll end up on the practice squad, I don't think he'd make it through a full season there if he just was left there.
Completely agree. Anytime you play 2 seasons of 1,000 snaps in the NFL, you're probably gonna, and you're on the practice squad, you're gonna be somebody's target. A team that's gonna make a playoff run that needs a average to below average center because they have they're so desperate. He's an appealing option, and we have to be comfortable with that as Ravens fans. That we got to be lucky enough to think that our depth is good enough that he's not going to make our final roster, but be okay with that. Our practice squad is going to get picked on a little bit more than others, and particularly our offensive line depth just shown year after year. One of the reasons why the Ravens do so well in the postseason and the preseason is because our offensive line has really good depth, and they're well coached, and they can really control the game at the end of a preseason game. So, he's definitely a target for a team trying to make a playoff run, or even just get some scouting for next year as a possible option for them at starting center.
Sure, I do think he's not like a John Simpson target or a Greg Senat target, who are guys that's a very hard type of body type to keep on the practice squad because it's kind of ideal for the position. Greg Senat didn't end up being much of a left tackle, but the Ravens drafted him, and left tackles are very hard to find. Left tackle body types are much rarer, and he the organization understood the fact that they were going to lose him if they put him on the practice squad, and sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And the same is true of a Simpson, I think, because of his length and size, particularly if he shows anything in the preseason about being able to back up at left tackle. I think he's a potential guy that they would lose if they put on the practice squad this year. He has a history of being a penalty guy, which it's maybe a black mark against him that other teams would look at. But generally speaking, I think there's enough out there on those two players that either one of them would be in demand at some point, including Mustipher, whose body type is not rare. He's a short arm guy, and I think it's just a matter in his case of there's enough film out there that somebody's pretty comfortable about just how below average he is, and it's above their replacement level for that point in the season.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
All right, let's talk about a good season and a great season for Sam Mustipher. So a good season. What do you got for me?
Yeah, a good season for him is that he is seen as a replacement level option if that were to come up for the Ravens. If he is somebody who makes their practice squad and is known as a legitimate option to back up Linderbaum, I think that's a good season for Mustipher and for us as Ravens fans. I don't really see a path where he's going to make the team and have any type of significant role. But as we have seen time and time again, little injuries or even a major injury can be devastating to an offensive line. If the Ravens feel strongly enough to keep him around, and for him to try to contribute in any way, I think that that's a win. And we did sign him for much, so there's not really anything to lose at this point.
Yeah, I'm very similar. I'll just read mine. Plays practice as well in the preseason and is offered a practice squad spot as the Ravens' 10th offensive lineman. Activated for 1 to 3 games due to injuries, sees less than 150 snaps, and delivers above the replacement level. So I'm not saying he has to be league average. I just want something that's above the replacement level, and I think he's perfectly capable of delivering on that if he's called on. How about a great season? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, a great season in my book is that he actually jumps McCary as the backup center. So McCary, there obviously his role, and the reason why he got the contract that he did was to be the kind of the band-aid offensive lineman, right? If Kevin Zeitler goes out for a play, McCary fills in at right guard for a play. They don't need to reshuffle the whole deck. If Mustipher is able to have a great season, in my opinion, it's he's being activated on game day because he is the backup center, and they find it more valuable to put him there and then keep McCary either playing in a backup tackle role or backup guard role. That McCary is actually not the band-aid for center that Mustipher is. That's what I would classify as a great season. If anything happened to Linderbaum, he finds his way onto the field, and they actually prioritize that rather than just throwing McCary out there.
Okay, I think that's a good way to put it. I stated it a little differently. I'd said, first of all, for starters, I think the Ravens' offensive line coaching unlocks previously untapped value. I think that's really a key for him is what were the Bears doing wrong? Why did they like Mustipher so much that they decided to go out and get him as opposed to just taking another guy straight out of college who has no record? And of course, straight out of college guy, an undrafted guy, has the additional advantage of you have him for 4 years if it works out. So when you take a 4th-year player like Mustipher, to me, that's a you like something about that guy. Same with John Simpson, by the way, that they have to like something about him in order to make that kind of move. So I'd say he plays in practice as well. His footwork is improved to at least adequate for center and guard pulling assignments. I'd like to see a mobility upgrade of the sort that we saw with Morgan Moses last year. So Morgan Moses, just much more mobility than I thought was possible. And, frankly, by other grading services, by looking at it myself, you see a guy who just is a better run blocker than the Ravens possibly could have expected. I'd love to see that kind of upgrade out of Mustipher this year. And then I think, if he comes in and fills in at a league average level when called upon for 250 plus snaps, whether that's at center, guard, wherever they need him, 6th offensive lineman, maybe for a few plays, I think any of that is potentially within Mustipher's wheelhouse and is something he could provide the Ravens. All right. We good on that? Any comments before we move on to David Ojabo?
No, completely agree. And hopefully the offensive line all stays healthy.
There you go. So one of the nice things about these shows is I usually give the player, the analyst, a chance with a kind of a star player and another player who's kind of on the fringe of the roster, might be fighting for playing time. But that's the idea. I try and mix it up. So, or you get maybe 2 players who are both competing for a role in some way. But with Ojabo, this is your star player, Danny. So you asked for this one. 2nd-year player turned 23 in May. Tell us a little bit about David Ojabo and what you see with him.
Yeah, I thought you did it as a business decision for people to download the podcast. You put the star down there. I thought it was that was a very sharp move.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ojabo just turned 23 years old in the 2022 draft, 2nd round pick. Pick 45 tragically tore his Achilles in the pre-draft process. For anyone that forgot that. And was projected top 15, top 20 pick. Prior to that, had a outstanding NFL combine. Really, I think, improved his draft status at his pro days where he has Achilles injury. Just a terrible for him. And, a player that I think if I was watching his college just tape and also as a Penn State fan, watching him just completely humiliate Penn State and destroy Sean Clifford's will. As a speed rusher, that injury, it did make me a little worried with, his recovery for this was going to be crucial. It really was. As somebody, he's a edge rusher who's going to need to rely a lot on his speed, his bend. An Achilles injury is just is a huge red flag. Having said that, if for Ravens fans that forgot, he actually came back to practice with them in the middle of last season. Him and Tyus Bowser came in as reinforcements, I believe, right before the Saints game, and Ojabo would practice for the rest of the season, getting his first activation against the Browns week 16,
15.
I believe, or week 15. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then he got really his first chance, his first NFL snaps in the Bengals game, which, if you forget, he had a strip sack against Joe Burrow, which is something that I'm sure we'll talk about. That I think is going to be something that recurs and one of his best talents. But yeah, just as a reminder of Ojabo's rookie year and what his pre-draft process looked like. And the Ravens spent a second-round pick on him.
Yeah, so we won't know obviously until the season is done, but we probably will have a pretty good idea. Is the David Ojabo pick worth it or not? Because you really have to see something by year 2 from a second round draft pick, and in particular, you deferred this guy's start an entire year, so I think that they really expect to get something in 2023 out of Ojabo. Had only 21 snaps as a rookie, 1 in that first game against Cleveland, 20 more as a situational pass rusher against the Bengals, and he also actually was activated for the wild card game and played 2 snaps, which was pretty cool. So it's at that point they liked enough of what they saw in that Cincinnati game that they activated from that. And if you remember the Cincinnati game, they sat a bunch of guys because they're trying to stay healthy. Needed to win one game. Then the following week, that seemed to be easier than trying to win with Anthony Brown to get a home game that would slightly improve their chances to win in the wild card game. But I think they did the right thing in terms of keeping some players sidelined. They ended up giving the Bengals and Joe Burrow all they could handle in that wild card game. And if it weren't for that fumble, we might have been talking about a very different end of the Ravens season, probably the next week in Kansas City, but we would have been talking about a very different end of the Ravens season. Ojabo, fantastic tools guy. And, sometimes we forget, but he's that combination of big and fast, reasonably long at 33.5 inches or so. And I'm just very excited to see what he can do with Chuck Smith, the pass rush guru, because a lot of what will be new to Ojabo is a lot of the compound moves that he can create. And more importantly, he might know something about them, but he can improve his timing on them tremendously by working with a Chuck Smith.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something in his draft profile that I was rereading. When you're looking at the Ravens having the 14th pick and having that Michigan connection, I was really preparing for the Ravens to spend prior to his injury to pick him at 14. And one of his positives was that he is actually very good at adjusting his rush plan, which is something that we really want to see from Odafe Owe. But Ojabo will be is a player that has shown his ability to adjust his rush. And either change his angle, change his move, using predominantly his speed rush. And he has some great statistics on that that I can get to in a minute here. But that was one of his biggest positives during the pre-draft process. And I think it's something that Chuck Smith can highlight more.
Oh, absolutely. Completely agree with that. And we've talked on this show a number of times about Odafe Owe. And Odafe Owe has all of the talent, even to a greater degree of athleticism than Ojabo has, which is remarkable because there's not very many athletes that are above the Ojabo level of athleticism. But what Ojabo doesn't have is a great get off. They've got to get that fixed if they want to make him an elite pass rusher. Once they do, he's going to be incredibly dangerous. He's already pretty dangerous. He already, generates a fair amount of pressure with this limited get off that is just not exactly what you'd want from an NFL pass rusher. Ojabo has the get off. He had that in school. Are we a little bit worried that he won't have it as much coming off the Achilles? I might be worried that it'd be just a quarter tick slower or whatever, but I really am not concerned that he's going to be not off the ball very quickly and not able to go into those compound moves. What I think was true of Ojabo is he has not really been playing football as long. And so whatever he's got for current compound moves, it's largely based on what athleticism he brings to the position. So it's kind of like saying, if you think you're a good route runner because you're Zay Flowers, and Zay Flowers is a guy who is a very sudden athlete, but not necessarily a great route runner, meaning he's not wiggling for that defender to make him miss. He's just very sudden himself, and he forces cornerbacks to lose him. I think that's who Ojabo is. I think he's got a tremendous amount in terms of what he can do to make a tackle, make a misstep that he can then exploit, and both throw in that wiggle out there in the same way, a wide receiver does at the top of the stem, and also then knowing how to take advantage of it and have the timing to take advantage of it with a Euro step, a spin move, any of those compound moves will be very exciting to see from Ojabo.
Yeah. Great instincts. Completely agree on that. And I think instincts is one of the things that I just noticed whenever I would watch him play, and rewatching him play for this. I think one of the best ways to explain some of his instincts is his ability to force the ball out. And it's something at Michigan that he not only became known for, he set their school record for most forced fumbles, which was just, as somebody who, obviously we want to see turnovers. But if we're going to look at somebody on how they'll, use their football instincts, one of the, biggest things that you can see is, just their ability to place the ball, to find the ball, and then create a plan to be able to knock it out. One of the, cool things, if you look at him in comparison to Will Anderson, of Alabama, Ojabo, had almost triple the amount of forced fumbles, I think, as Will Anderson did in his whole career, which is just a really good sign for what his, what we're going to maybe see from him next year.
So Ojabo played only 14 college games in his career, which is really something in terms of being there. But at Michigan in 2021, so it's only 2 years ago, had 5 forced fumbles. And Will Anderson, yeah, you're right. He had 1 forced fumble in 34 and a half, 34, whatever it was, college sacks. And that was one of the real bugaboos about Anderson, was him just not using his club enough and trying to be too much of a closer on the sacks themselves. But anyway, it's something that Ojabo definitely has very violent hands, by the way. And one of the things, we hope none of this is gone, by the way, because we haven't really seen it just a little bit last year. But think Pernell McPhee, if you're thinking about the violence of hands, a guy who just constantly can be basically go into the gut, go into the midsection, striking the opponent almost like it's a video game where you have to. We had a video game growing up. There was some sort of Olympics video game. I can remember when I was in college, it was about 40 years ago, where you kind of had to tap 2 buttons, and the more that you could do it closely, let's say there's a little bit of that one strike is you can be good, but if you can strike multiply and be violent, particularly on his arms, you can very quickly get an offensive lineman to get off balance in some direction. That can lead to penetration. And McPhee on the inside as a Ravens rusher in particular, just fantastic at that. So I look back at the 2014 Ravens, pass rush driven by McPhee from the inside, despite the fact that Suggs and Dumerville were having outstanding years on the outside collecting those sacks.
Yeah. That's an interesting comp, because one of the things that when I was prepping for this is looking at some of Ojabo's statistics. When he was at Michigan, he had a 27% pass rush win rate when he was pass rushing from the inside. In comparison to his outside, he's 20.5% on pass rush snaps, which
20
I kind of
5?
only, 20.5. And I saw him as a pure speed outside guy. But he actually was pretty productive. In fact, more productive when he was going on the inside pass rush, using his speed and using some of, those violent hands. Hopefully that's something that he can continue and be able to get on the field with some of those race car packages. It'd be a big advantage to be able to have a pass rusher that can use some of that speed or some of his moves, and then get to the ball. That if he can continue that at the pro level, that'd be great.
Yeah, he definitely would be a major candidate to move inside. I don't think he has to be. I think you can do lots of things. I'd be frankly interested in having Ojabo. You run a package where Bowser lines up inside, but your real intention with him is to drop him to cover, and you have Ojabo and Owe on opposite sides. I think that could be devastating in terms of making use of both guys in a wide. But I do think Ojabo, he's one of the guys potentially that could have a lot of use inside, and I pity the guard whose face he crosses as an underneath guy on studs, because he's a very violent dude, and he is going to force shoulders to get turned, and that's going to create opportunities for other players, not just himself. Oftentimes what happens is the under player is often the one who gets the opportunity after there has to be a peel off from one of these two guys who are turned at a 45-degree angle. So you want to create that kind of opportunity, but it's often for yourself. So he'd be a guy who can, I'm sure, take advantage of that, and being a guy who can adjust, during his pass rushes is very key to that, to get off that block that remains. So I'm excited about that.
Really excited. Yeah, I can't agree more. I was, imagining like what can this look like in the Ravens defense, and him, Owe, and then you combine it with the speed of our inside linebackers who are pretty great, pretty solid blitzers as well. McDonald should have plenty of speed to use in the pass rush plan, with either simulated pressures and people having to respect just how fast between Ojabo and Owe, Queen and Roquan. That's a lot of speed and a lot of things, a lot of juice, hopefully, in this pass rush where McDonald can be pretty creative.
Yeah. Ojabo also definitely the opportunity to be quick enough to be an over guy as well. So I'm not limiting him to being just an under guy. I just think with the kind of violence he brings, he'd be extremely good there. One of the interesting things, and we really have not talked about this, because part of it is that he was coming in last year. He hadn't played all that much college ball. We thought NFL weight room, he needs time with that, blah, blah, blah. As we always talk about players, and also recovering from injury, we thought the most he's going to get on the field is as a situational pass rusher. Happen to be completely right about that. Okay, so that's exactly what he did in his first year. But I think the hope would be that David Ojabo can provide something against the run as well. You don't want all those early down snaps going to Owe on that rush side. And you might also consider, because David Ojabo is a fast player, can he also give you something on the Sam side at some point? Not necessarily this year, but maybe in the future. Is he a guy who has the traits that he can drop to cover and do you some good there as well?
Yeah, I think it would be. I think he will definitely have a few snaps there, either just with disguise coverage. They always mix it up, so I do think that we will see some Sam experience this year from him. He's certainly athletic enough to play it. He may not have that football experience yet to be able to play the Sam linebacker, and I don't think that he'll be as productive as Tyus Bowser there. But yeah, I do think that we will see some Sam snaps, just given the fact that the Ravens do mix it up. In terms of playing the run, there is I don't know if there's a football team that loves to see their outside linebackers play the run, like the Ravens. Historically, we've had great run defenders, Terrell Suggs and Julius Thomas, Joe Johnson, some great outside linebacking run defenders, who certainly do not get free reign to go rush the passer no matter what and leave a gap open. The responsibilities are sound. I think Belichick has been given a lot of credit for that over the years in terms of making his edge rushers stay at home and play the run first, especially on pass run downs. The Ravens have done the same thing, and regardless of defensive coordinator, stopping the run has been a critical part for being on the field, and they've also shown that in the way that they've paid defenders. They pay people that can stop the run and have help their defense stop that first. Ojabo, I don't think was drafted to stop the run. I think he was drafted to become their next great pass rusher. With that being said, we need him to be able to stop the run because he'll get more snaps, and we want to get as much value out of this player as he possibly can. In college, he obviously was not he was not a great run defender nonetheless. In the Georgia game, he was pulled off the field on running downs, and he didn't really necessarily showcases that part of his game. But however, like you said, he certainly has the physical tools to become a great run defender. Speed, length, and strength. There is another element to his game, and hopefully, just given the fact that he hasn't played a ton of football, is the reason why he isn't a great run defender as of right now.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it might be a multi-year journey to get there. I mean, certainly, run defending is probably the easier thing to add first because it doesn't necessarily have to change positions to play it. And in fact, you need to know how to play it if you're going to be on there for any down, which is not an obvious passing situation. So he'll need to pick up that first, and then the second thing is this much more complex notion of what are his responsibilities if he has to drop from a Sam spot. And he could, you can also drop from the rush spot. It did happen. Terrell Suggs dropped to cover a fair amount, not a ton, but a fair amount. And Terrell Suggs also had tremendous instincts on when a screen pass was coming out, such that he knew, wait a minute, this is too easy. And he immediately bowled out to the screen pass, or he'd jump up in the air and try and deflect the ball, or all the things that we remember Terrell for over the years. Those are things where Ojabo is going to have to learn at least those things. And then down the line, I really do think it's a year or two away that he probably is a better Sam linebacker candidate. And if the Ravens, in their desperation this year with what now the NFI news that's come out on Bowser, do they need another guy to make that move immediately? I think, unfortunately, it's probably more likely to be Owe that would be the guy they move over. I hope it's Van Noy that they pick up and they can plug him in at the same spot. But unfortunately, I think Owe would be the guy, and I'm afraid that would potentially stunt his development.
Yeah, I know they brought in Van Noy for a visit on Friday, and we're recording on Monday. So we got a couple days before the start of camp. Hopefully we can bring in another guy. Maybe Owe doesn't have to fill that role. But yeah, with the Bowser news, I think that they may experiment even with both of them, just in case. But I for Owe and Ojabo's development, we probably want them staying in a rush role in priority to playing Sam. And yeah, bringing somebody in, I think, is the most ideal thing given the Bowser news. And hopefully we can learn more about Bowser once training camp starts and what's going on with him.
Yeah, I don't know how long that's going to take to develop, but an NFI designation is a pretty serious thing. So I'm not sure exactly why that, as opposed to a PUP designation, for example, which you could come off of at any time. But the Ravens obviously have their reasons, and I'm sure we'll find out as time moves forward. In terms of what we're looking for in 2023, I think we've talked about a lot of things, but one thing we didn't hit on yet is special teams. And he did play a little bit of special teams, about 12 snaps in his 3 games that he was active: the Cleveland, the Bengals finale, then the Bengals wild card game. Interestingly, they've got him on the punt block team for his primary responsibility there, which is he's an interior guy on the. He's obviously not a jammer, but he's an interior guy that they're trying to get in and try and block a punt. It's always a nice little addition to be good at that, and it's the kind of thing that it wouldn't surprise me if that's something Ojabo really excels at. The Ravens have had certain guys in their history, and LaRon McClain comes to mind as a guy who had a block punt that went for a safety, and was a guy who played on special teams for years. It would not surprise me if Ojabo stays on that team for this year. But effectively, essentially, eventually, when he becomes too valuable as a pass rusher, they're going to take him off that team. They took Ed Reed off the punt block team after 2 years.
Yeah, I think Bill Belichick called Ed Reed a Hall of Famer just for punt blocks. But listen, if there's any coach that's going to keep a player with the potential of Ojabo on special teams, it's going to be John Harbaugh. I mean, we used like the 14th pick on Kyle Hamilton last year, and Kyle Hamilton played a lot of special teams and was damn good at it too. So if Ojabo's good at his special teams role, he'll find a way on. We always will make sure that we're getting as much value as we can.
Yeah. I seem to always end up playing a computer game that has some sort of a skill tree progression. Let me ask it as a question this way. You can have one of these things in 2023. You can have one in 2024. And here are the choices. Ojabo can become an above average run defender. Ojabo can be a valuable piece that you can kick inside and still get pass rush value from. Okay. Or Ojabo can move over and play some Sam linebacker for you. Which of those three do you want first?
um, obviously, I mean the pass rush I think is the most important thing. It's probably where the NFL is going. But the Sam role really does make the Ravens defense unique, and it's really important to them. I think the addition of Roquan Smith last year was ginormous, but I think also getting back Tyus Bowser was like just as important.
Mhm.
And what that did for their defense and their statistics and DVOA, they really do go hand in hand. I do think that we have been missing that guy that can just win, like a pass rush rep and take over a game in the second half. We just really haven't had that since the Suggs, Zadarius Smith, that the 2018 season. We
Mhm.
really haven't had that go-to pass rusher. Got to have a sack or got to get a pressure. I think it's kind of shown in these bigger games against some of the AFC powers, like where you kind of need to learn to rush for and play that the quote unquote like too high defense. I do think we're missing that guy. So I will pick the pass rush thing. How about you?
Okay. Yeah, I don't know because it's so big, but I think the pass rush thing is the more likely thing to happen in year one and
Yeah.
the more likely thing to be done really well. So I take the kick inside. And I think the Ravens as a group need the pass rush more. Um, that Sam linebacker, I mean, it has an enormous pass rush component there. That's where a lot of the Ravens' pass rush versatility comes from. Is Tyus Bowser dropping off the line of scrimmage, which allows for overloads for the other side, allows for blitzes, and you've got a guy that's a very competent coverage guy. Frankly, the best outside linebacker in terms of coverage in the entire NFL, who's just extraordinarily valuable in that role. The Ravens, they've had three guys. They've been, really blessed with three players in their history at outside linebacker who could cover like nobody else, and that Adela's Thomas, of course, and Tyus Bowser and Matt Judon, and to have Judon and Bowser on the team at the same time, have two guys, it's just completely unfair in terms that you look back at the 2018 pass rush and some of the ones, I guess the 19 pass rush as well. Just that's a hell of a lot of flexibility to have if you're a defensive coordinator.
Yeah, absolutely. Judon has certainly thrived in New England, and I think got his money. But I think it's a fair argument to say, would you rather have Tyus Bowser at 4 years for 24 million or Matthew Judon at his price? I think Bowser was just about the right player, right price for the Ravens cap
Yeah,
situation at that time.
yeah, it was definitely if you had to choose that or what Judon ended up getting. Yeah, I completely agree. All right, so let's talk about a good season and a great season for David Ojabo. And this is an exciting one because I think you could go a lot of different ways from that. But for you, what would a good season look like for David Ojabo?
Yeah, honestly, I'm trying to temper expectations. He got the Ravens mini camp, the hype, he got the most the standout player, which I'm always a little, I try to just shun myself away from that. Fact of the matter, it's going to be his first season in the NFL, and he played some snaps last year, and obviously had a great moment against the Bengals, but you are a little nervous for a couple of things. Him hitting the rookie wall or him, just getting, remembering the playbook, and we've seen growing pains before. So I'm trying to temper expectations, but it becomes a key part of the Ravens rotation for pass rushers, and is able to continue some of the great numbers that he showed at the end of his days in Michigan or his last year in Michigan, really. Maintaining some sort of pressure rate that's comparable to that, or being able to continue to at least show that he's still trying to find the ball and force fumbles. but essentially just becoming part of their defensive rotation and showing the Ravens that he can be part of their pass rush and being a great pair with Odafe Owe and learning under Chuck Smith and showing growth throughout the year rather than just like starting hot and then dwindling down. How about you?
That's interesting. So you're saying don't hit any kind of a rookie wall in a second year that we didn't really see.
Yeah,
in year one. Yeah,
because I think we saw that from Owe, and Owe obviously had a slump last year, but then kind of finished the year well.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I'm a little nervous with Ojabo is that he just hasn't played a lot of football games. And I think a 17 game season is going to be a lot for him. And I think as fans, we got to be patient, make sure that they're not overloading it with snaps right away so that he's able to not only make it for that, but he's able to at least be productive as well for hopefully a good playoff run.
Yeah, I think that's a good set of things. You did name a lot of things in your tempered expectation list, but I've got a lot on mine too. This is a good season. So once again, 60th percentile, 80th percentile for me for good and great. I'll give you good here. I want him to gel with Chuck Smith to become a valued situational pass rusher. And so that means two things. One is he can come on the field and be an outside rusher, but also he can kick inside is inherent in that. And to do that, I think he's going to have to learn a little bit from Chuck Smith in terms of improving his pass rush efficiency, which I think, that's what they brought Chuck Smith in for. Man, we have expectations that are unbelievable of what he's going to do for these couple of young pass rushers, but be really wonderful to see him actually have a big imprint on Owe and Ojabo. I want him definitely to deliver some one-on-one wins. The Ravens have been short on that. Most of their sacks are created by first man pressure, second man cleanup, and we need some one-on-one wins. And in particular, Ojabo with his fantastic club, which is another thing I want to see. His one-on-one wins can be very valuable. Now his actual sack was a cleanup sack with clubbing the ball free. So those are valuable too. So I put down the use of the club regardless of how it gets there. But being first man of the ball, first man of the quarterback, and stripping the ball instead of just kind of tugging at him and letting him get away, because the Ravens have had some of that's even led to sacks, but also has led to some really frustrating plays. He's going to be better probably at finishing a quarterback on the first shot. I don't have any specific requirements for pressures or sacks, but I just want him to be considered an important element of the pass rush all season. So I'm not saying, he's got to have 7 sacks and 3 forced fumbles or anything like that, not at least in a good season component. And I'd like him to average 25 to 30 snaps per game. Now, it could be more than that, but at 25 to 30 snaps per game, that's right around the 60th percentile for me. And that he'd have to be healthy for a good number of games for that to be the case. And that's where I am with a good season. So mostly qualitative stuff. Works with Chuck Smith, develops the ability to rush from the interior are the major considerations.
Yeah, agreed. And a great season for me is continuing his pass rush development, and also growing in his ability to change his pass rush, not having a predetermined move, but his ability to adapt as he rushes the quarterback, given what the offensive line gives him. Continue his club, continuing forced fumbles, being able to find the ball. That would be so valuable in an NFL defense. If he's even able to put up fractional numbers in comparison to what he did in Michigan. I think an indicator for a great season for him would be the Ravens don't feel the need to address edge or outside linebacker in round 1 of the draft next year. And that they see Ojabo as this guy is going to be part of the defensive future in the same sentence as Kyle Hamilton, that he's a linchpin in this defense. And we can't imagine our defensive future without him. He becomes part of that. Hopefully we have a guy in the potential that could become a Raven staple and somebody that we can look to keep around for a long time.
Now that's a really interesting point, because the Ravens could decide not to address pass rusher in round 1 if after this year they decide to pick up Owe's 5th-year option. Then they've got two rush linebackers for the next 2 years, and that could be very exciting. Boy, then one of them's going to have to learn to play Sam. It's really going to have to happen. But,
very true.
But I'll put in a great season here is that we regularly comment on the violence of his hands. Now that's something I don't think it's a given that's good that we're gonna have that. But if he's gonna be great, I think it's a requirement. And I think at least 20% of the time, that's something that we should want to hear. I think compound moves take a step forward are very well timed. I'm okay if he can't adjust on the fly. What I want for him, because that's like Muhammad Ali stuff, to be able to throw the next punch while you're throwing the first punch of a combination, to change to a different punch on the second, change your combination up or stall it. But I do want very well timed moves out of him to say, he knows exactly how, it's 0.2 of a second or it's 0.4 of a second is a big difference in terms of when you hit the guy with your second move or after you've done just enough to get him to bite when you make your counter. That is what I really want to see with him and Chuck Smith. I would consider that that would be value well realized from the Chuck Smith signing. In terms of pass rush productivity, I think he could threaten to supplant Oweh as the team's primary rush outside linebacker if he is a top 20% season. It's not too hard to imagine. I mean, in some cases, there are some people that say, oh, sure, top 30, 40, 50% season, he could supplant Oweh because Oweh doesn't have the get off and he does. And I can see some of that, but Oweh is a much better pressure machine right now. And I think that we're going to have to see that from Ojabo. I don't think it's impossible. And I think at the top 20%, he's definitely threatening to supplant Oweh. I think we get at least a glimpse of him in run defense that we could possibly project to see him to a much larger role in terms of snap count in years 3 and beyond. And we don't have to see all that this year, but we need to be able to see that he could maybe be a 60% snap count guy in his third year, just because he seems to be picking up the run defense component a little bit more. And I want a good number of one-on-one wins, again, with a great season. On the first one, I see we need to see some one-on-one wins. In the great season, we need to see a good number of one-on-one wins. And I'll set him a threshold here in terms of sacks, is that I'd like to see 7+ sacks with 2+ forced fumbles would certainly be meeting that standard in terms of enough one-on-one wins and really delivering the club that we want. And on this case, the only other metric I have is that I want him to average 35+ snaps per game. They might decide they want to keep him fresher as a pass rusher, really keep his snaps right down at that minimum, or they might decide, hey, this guy's too good to keep off the field. 45, 50 snaps is really what we need. But I think they can keep him fresh enough probably at 35 snaps that he can still be very effective for the Ravens.
Yeah, those are some good thresholds, and I think definitely fair for what a great season for him would be. If I would love to see whatever his teammate from Michigan did his rookie year. But if he's in the same ballpark as some of those great edge rushers from the previous draft class, that would be terrific for basically his first season in the NFL. But certainly excited for this guy, and the hire of Chuck Smith. I know that you've talked about it a lot on your shows, but that was a sharp hire by the Ravens, and I am excited to see what he does with Ojabo and Oweh. For just pass rush moves and development. It seems like we at least have two guys that are really interested in working hard and seem to be teachable and coachable as well, which I think hopefully translates well. And yeah, just excited for what David Ojabo can bring to the Ravens. And if we get that one-on-one win guy, that would be that would be awesome for the defense.
Yeah, well, we can go with the Aiden Hutchinson standard. He had 9.5 sacks as a rookie, 15 quarterback hits, and was the number 2 guy in the defensive rookie of the year. Who I'm struggling now to remember who actually won that.
I'm going to guess Sauce Gardner won.
Oh, probably.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah. That's not fact checked though. So.
All right, fair enough. And he didn't have any forced fumbles. We had 2 fumbles recovered for Aiden Hutchinson. So anyway. Yeah. It was a lot of fun talking about these guys, particularly Ojabo, with you. And I think, if you're looking at all the players who can surprise you on the upside, David Ojabo is one of the guys who all of a sudden who is this guy all of a sudden? I don't know even how great he can, but kind of what the Orioles are going through right now with Gunnar Henderson. I don't think we also know what the ceiling is on Adley Rutschman. Don't mind me, but he's a little bit closer to his prime year. And in the case of Henderson, just very exciting where he is right now.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Listening to a lot of the Ravens previews, they're talking about, you know, where's their defense going to be this year, and a lot of it's thrown in like, oh yeah, they drafted David Ojabo, and it's kind of just thrown in at the end. When I think in Ravens circles, it's almost the opposite. Like we're so pumped for this guy and what he can do. I think that he obviously is like the one Raven who can really surprise the league, and really be a standout player for them. Their defense has a ton of talent between Roquan and Humphrey and Marcus Williams, Hamilton as well.
Hamilton would be another guy
Yeah,
who we don't really know exactly what he's going to do this year. That's very exciting to me.
yeah, having those two coming up the pipeline too, it's just great to have, you know, some of these younger guys that they've drafted, and hopefully it works out. I do think that he has the talent, certainly the skills, and you know, we bit the bullet for 1 year to draft him in the second round, and I, you know, debate that value, and we'll find out that at the end of this year if that was worth it. But certainly a guy that I think is flying under the radar and can become a Raven that really changes their season this year, especially the defense.
All right. Outstanding. Danny, just great talking football with you. Tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, just kind of, you know, djoseph0815. Don't get into a ton of threads, but you know, we'll obviously engage with anyone who wants to talk Ravens. But looking forward to training camp and hopefully a great season. Can't come soon enough.
All right, outstanding. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a film study short, hit me up. I'm still going through new shows with people. In fact, I've got a guy who's recording one tomorrow for the first time. And if you want to do that, I got time to air these at various times through the preseason. I'd love to hear from you. I'll get back to you right away. DMs are always open on Twitter. Danny, thanks again for joining me.
Thanks a lot, Ken.
We'll talk to you next time on Film Study.